Hello everyone, and welcome to another session of Exploration Tech. I wish I had cool sound effects that cheering in the background, because we should be excited and cheering today. As I just said, I'm incredibly excited to have Morgan Phelps with us today. I learned so much from her and her team at Colorful Connections, and specifically on the topic that we're going to be hitting today, building an inclusive culture with colorful connections. And so I'm going to keep my intro short. My name is Jared Heckler. I'm the Director of Sales and Marketing, and I'm going to pass it to Lori and let her introduce herself.
Yes, really excited about the conversation that we're going to have today. I'm Lori McDonald. I started Brilliance in 1998. My background is in computer electrical engineering, and what most people remember about me is that I ended up working at NASA Johnson Space Center as a flight controller for the space shuttle program. It was a really amazing opportunity. Originally, it was through an internship at Purdue, and eventually when I graduated from Purdue, I went to work there full time. I ended up meeting my husband at NASA. He also worked as a flight controller for the space shuttle program. He also was an engineering student at Purdue. He eventually went to work for Rockwell Automation. So we ended up in Milwaukee in 1998 when he was promoted to work at Rockwell's headquarters here. And I was trying to figure out what could be as cool as space. And I decided to start a web development company because the web seemed like a pretty cool place to be, especially in 1998 and also today. And so what we realized after a few years in the web development space was we were kind of uniquely equipped to work in the e-commerce space, specifically helping manufacturers and distributors implement digital commerce solutions. My husband Dave managed the largest data warehouse at Rockwell Automation with Rockwell's distributors, and so had some really great insights into challenges that existed in the industrial space. And we've grown. My husband left Rockwell 10 years ago, and now he leads our development team. We made the Inc. 5000 list last year, seen some really exciting growth along the way. And also along the way, I've had to learn a lot of new skills about what it looks like to be a business leader and grow a business, and also trying to figure out what does it look like to create a team that exemplifies the values and culture that is really important personally to me as well. And so as a part of that journey, one of the questions that I've been asking myself is, what does it look like to create teams that are diverse, equitable, and inclusive? And along that way, I was so honored to get to meet Morgan Phelps. A few years back, we met and have had a number of conversations. And then eventually, I'm really excited to have hired Morgan and our team at Colorful Connections to help Brilliance along our journey in that. And I've learned so much. And I'm really excited about the conversation that we're going to have today. So Morgan, I'd love to let you introduce yourself to our audience.
Surely, Lori, I don't know how I'm going to. I think it's completely unfair to have to go after
I agree.
company. And so, I'll do what I can. But I always love hearing your story, though. Truly, kudos to you and team and your growing company and business. And it's such an honor to be a part of that and to be able to help your team along your journey. So with that, my name is Morgan Phelps, and I will keep my introduction brief because I know that we'll be digging in a lot more for different questions. But I am the founder of Colorful Connections, and we are a social enterprise, and we help people and companies become better versions of themselves by helping to attract, retain, and grow an inclusive team that represents the diversity of those in the communities that they serve. So high level, nutshell, that's what we do. My career started out in journalism, and then I crossed over into communications and public relations and had a significant amount of time there in that industry, very homogenous industry. And that's what kind of started to lead me to Colorful Connections and creating the organization.
Who isn't excited for this? No one. Everyone's excited. A couple of housekeeping items before we get into it. If you have any questions throughout our conversation today, feel free to punch them into the chat box and we'll do our best to address those along the way. And I'd also highly recommend that you follow both Colorful Connections and Morgan on LinkedIn. You can also connect with Brilliance and give us a follow. That'd be great too. And Lori and myself. Morgan, can you tell us more about your journey into starting Colorful Connections and the need that you saw for organizations to be creating inclusive teams?
Surely, and I'll try to figure out the best way to say this succinctly, because I think both parts of that question are probably related in terms of how I started Colorful Connections and also why it's important to create inclusive teams. Is that I left my cushy 9 to 5, salary job, exciting, projects and work. Not that I love the work that we're doing, but meaning I left work and I left projects that I wanted to do and I enjoyed doing, and I found a lot of fulfillment in it. But at the same time, I got tired of the constant problems. So I mentioned, working in a homogenous industry and just in the agency world, it's competitive, it's extremely biased, and as I mentioned, homogenous. And I use that word not just meaning, racially, but it's about like a type. So after a while, I just got tired of being one of few. I got tired of the gaslighting. I got tired of the lip service. And at the time, I was in Chicago working with a group of women of color in the industry and communications, trying to get different jobs and some jobs at this highly aspirational agency, global agency that I was working at. And at the same time, that company and other similar agencies were saying this, I want to find these people and I want to hire these people. And it's like, well, I have a lot of them and I represent them and sure. And for some reason, the connection wasn't really happening. So from some respect, it started from there of seeing it as a communication problem of why is there this disconnect if the desire and the demand is there, the supply is there, what is happening and how can we address this? So coupled with that, and then also just experiences in the workplace where I realized that despite either best intentions or certain programs or projects happening, again, just for personal agendas, sometimes internal politics and internal agendas can get in the way of progress. So I started from there, actually developing what is now Colorful Connections. I did not intend to start a company. It was originally meant to be a program, and the more that I started researching and speaking firsthand to hiring managers, talent acquisition directors, global HR managers about the problem from their perspective to understand more about the complexity of the problem, just firsthand of what exactly are the pain points, that's where it started evolving into what is today Colorful Connections.
Such a great story because it's clearly it arose out of a need that you saw and is a passion of yours, and you're doing something about it. Before we dig more into like what it looks like to build an inclusive culture, I'd love to make sure to kind of just level set for all of us as a group to kind of define what is diversity, equity, and inclusion, or kind of explain those terms as we talk about them today.
You can get in depth very, easily and quickly, and very much it, a lot does vary in terms of our approach, in terms of how we work with clients. It very much varies based on the organization and what your team looks like and yada, yada, yada. But for high level purposes and just so that we're all on the same page, there's a popular like party analogy that I'll use where diversity is essentially being invited to the party without having to chase down an invite, right? So if diversity is being able to get to the party, then inclusion is where they're paying the music that you like and you're jamming out. And equity is making sure that there's equal access, or not equal access, but just access, and no barriers to attending the party, no barriers to being able to hit the dance floor even, or dance however you'd like, or enjoy the music however you'd like. And that's actually where that goes into the idea of belonging, which is where you're taking it even a step further of being able to jam out in whatever way without any fear of judgment, just being able to dance like you want to, or enjoy the music as you want to, enjoy the party as you want to, again, without that fear of judgment. So diversity, equity, inclusion, but belonging is often an overlooked area that's just as, if not more important than the others too, especially from a business perspective.
Yeah, definitely. When I think about that, Yeah, just thinking about how belonging, how well, all of those things. And I know we're about to get to that more about how all of those things really matter also in terms of creating teams, people that are loyal and want to stay. I wanted to talk about like what are the reasons an organization or a team will choose to invest and work on building an inclusive team. And I know diverse, equitable, inclusive, having that belonging, there's a moral argument that this is the right thing to do. We also know that many times this work doesn't get prioritized by organizations. And I'd love for you to talk to us about the business case that you see around creating inclusive teams.
Yes, absolutely. I would love to do that. So, and I'm glad that you acknowledge that too, because oftentimes there is a genuine desire to do better, right? And there might be one person on a leadership team or just one person that's driving it because, yes, it's the right thing to do. And maybe, the president at the time, says that this is important and we should move forward. But if you don't have everyone on the same page, especially from a business imperative perspective, it's very difficult to create sustainable results and long-lasting results. And that's one of the areas that we focus on with Colorful Connections. It's not just something that you can flip on and off and something that you necessarily would want to. So yes, there's a desire oftentimes too, and it seems like it's the right thing to do, and everyone's talking about this, and there seems to be commitment out there, and we want to be on the right side of this, right? But at the same time, especially for, a company like Brilliance, or depending on your agency, especially with B2C, there's one piece of research that I love. And when I first started rolling out Colorful Connections, I came across so many different people, whether it was investors, business owners, and I still do today, about the question of correlation or causation, right? Like, does a diverse team really make a difference? So just using advertisements as an example, if you have a person of color and just looking at diversity and giving the example of race as or one dimension of diversity with that, there's research that proves if at least one person represents the targeting user, the entire team is as much as 158% more likely to innovate accordingly. That's causation. And also when you're looking at that, you might be thinking of the mistakes that you don't want to have happen, this advertisement, this article, or whatever, and the misses. But what's often overlooked is the missed opportunity for that as well. So when you're looking at the business opportunity, you're looking at market innovation that you otherwise wouldn't have considered because of group thinking or because everyone on your team is alike. But those who you're innovating for, those who you are working with, everything, it's not a homogenous, the other side of that coin doesn't look exactly like you, doesn't think exactly like you. So you're missing out on opportunities from a business perspective just the same. So it very much does help organizations with their bottom line, being market leaders. We all know this, but that's how, even from a small aspect, it can make a difference.
Yeah, that's really great. That all gets me excited from the perspective that, at Brilliance, we're about innovation. We're about helping organizations innovate. And to do that, we want to be innovative ourselves. And it's great to see how doing the right things also adds up to supporting innovation. And it makes sense too, right? Because we need more ideas. We're creating a space where people feel more comfortable offering what they know.
It's important to have the right, reasons to approach DEI within the workplace, especially, but it's also naive to think that everyone cares, so
Right.
that's why we very much try to, at the very least, educate and stress the business imperative so that everyone understands why this matters and how this folds into their day-to-day. Why is it important for you to help to create an inclusive environment? Because it is everyone's responsibility. How does that translate into you getting your reports a lot, getting your work out faster, or getting others to respond to you better, or, improving working relationships, anything? It's helping to understand and break it down in a way where, honestly, it's self-serving, but it's self-serving for a greater good.
So now that you've convinced an organization that they need to prioritize this, not just check the box, how would you recommend they get started?
That's a great question, because all this I feel like is a part of corporate social responsibility. It's just looking at it from a different aspect in a different way. So I talked about leadership. Leadership commitment is absolutely essential. If you do not have leadership commitment, buy-in, any type of effort, any program, it's fleeting and potentially performative, in which case that's going to bite you in the butt. So you need to make sure that you have leadership on board, and everyone, like whether it's the board or just like the partners, whoever. And then from there, and there are a variety of ways to go about it, but at the very least, developing some type of task force or committee to make sure that there are a group of people where you understand this is essential. Sometimes larger organizations, they might have a chief diversity officer or manager. Sometimes it's that one person's role to spearhead it, but at the very least, having a committee or task force within an organization, making sure that there are executive sponsors as well to help provide that leadership push behind it, and then also giving and empowering that team just as much with budget, because otherwise just giving them time and giving them a voice, is wonderful, but how much are you able to really move forward if you don't have budget to actually to do workshops or whatever other support that the team needs? So it needs to be taken with the utmost seriousness. And then even with that and building on that is to develop a plan. You don't do anything without a plan. You don't approach a project without a plan. Every business has a plan, and you need to have a plan, a strategy, and specific goals and KPIs to measure it. It needs to be taken, again, just as serious as any other initiative. And the work within DEI needs to be connected to the business strategy and the business goals. So that way you're able to connect it, and it's not just seen as, again, a nice to have. And after 3 years of XYZ program, oh, okay, well, that just kind of sizzled off and we'll keep it going. It helps to make sure that you're starting to weave it into the fabric of the organization, which ultimately is for the health, again, of the organization. So you have that. And then from there, what I would suggest is either doing an assessment, and we have free assessments on our website just to provide like baseline to understand and have some direction on where you need to go. So you can either do an assessment in addition to that, and maybe just starting off immediately, just surveying employees and just getting some of that like tangible feedback on what are the major problem areas so that you know some of the areas to focus on. That said, assessments really are helpful, and it's also helpful to look at it from a holistic perspective. So the way that we approach diversity is looking at it from I use an analogy of a three-legged stool, and that's kind of like how our business units are divided up too. So if you have a stool, right, with the 3 legs, if you're missing a leg, the whole thing topples over. So that's the idea of diversity, equity, and inclusion, right, within the workplace. If you're focusing on just one area because it's all interrelated, then you're still not going to have stability. You won't have long-term success and results. So for us, it's the ability to attract, again, retain, and then grow that diverse and inclusive team, right? Those are all critical pillars. So for thinking of how to implement this within the organization, and oftentimes hiring managers or CEOs might think about, let's just bring them in. We just want to hire. It's like, okay. But if you just focus on the attract pillar, again, the retention is often just as critical or important in terms of being able to keep, the diverse professionals that you've just hired, and also retain all of the quality employees. And then also having a strong, inclusive, and collaborative environment does you extremely well with referrals. So it kind of helps out in attracting. We've worked with clients and filling roles where, because of a toxic work environment, and we were transparent and warning about that up front, we ended up doing like an assessment. So we kind of had some line of sight into some things. And sure enough, it came up, where it was hard to attract people to a role. They said, no, thank you. I don't want to apply for this company simply because of the reputation. So you can't just start in one area and not the other. And you have to have, even thinking about succession planning and growing and making that investment just the same.
Yeah, There is so much there. One of the reasons I love talking to you, Morgan, is because it's clear to me when I talk to you that there are aspects to diversity, equity, inclusion work that I hadn't even considered, right? And that was one of the things I remember pretty early on from when we chatted. And also, you are able to break it down in a way to offer like, well, here's a place to start. It can both sometimes feel overwhelming, or I think on the flip side, sometimes we might make it seem like too overly simple. Like all we have to do is this one thing, which like, and you make it clear that it's not just one thing, and also there's a way to step into it.
I mean, I truly did. When I started Colorful Connections, I thought I could simply start with the attract pillar. I was like, oh, I'll just focus on recruiting for now. I'll
Sure.
chip away at that. We'll build up these other business units. And even trying to start the organization this way was not going to happen because everything is related so much. You know, it really is woven in and it's integrated. So it is, you can't just have a one solution, oh, we'll just hire this one recruiter and then our job is done after that, right? No, that doesn't work. We can't just do one unconscious bias training, 3 years ago and then, yeah, we're good. And it's like, no, it's about habits that need to be formed, habits that need to be broken. And 3 years ago, I'm sure the team looked extremely different, right? And whatever you learn in a one-time workshop, you go through that and then few months later, are you really continuing to practice the learnings that you have with that? Probably not if you don't have the right type of support systems in place or the tools and resources to encourage that.
What do you see as the obstacles to building an inclusive team?
The obstacles, leadership, right? Leadership commitment. If you don't have that, then that won't happen. Also, middle management is a key area as well that oftentimes gets overlooked because even if you have leadership that's saying, push forward and this is important, if you don't have the buy-in from your middle managers who oftentimes are, the day-to-day folks who's working with the rest of the employees, and oftentimes that friction area that comes with them, and they're having to deal with the realities of a deadline pressure, yet something else, and how do I really fold this in? That causes even more problems. So that's another area, expecting quick results. This is not going to happen overnight. This problem most likely was not created overnight. So just expecting things to happen immediately or not also giving this the attention that it needs in terms of, again, what are the resources, sometimes AKA money, right, to be able to invest in improvements for your team. So trying to do it on the cheap, expecting something quick, and really not making sure that everyone's on board, especially middle managers. A few examples.
Yes, yes, all good notes of like challenges that are out there. We see press about organizations who, have made statements that they're committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion, but they're not really living it out. And I'm curious from your perspective, do you think bigger organizations or smaller organizations have a better shot at actually pulling this off? I know when we originally chatted, I said to you that I thought maybe we were too small to engage in this work, and you convinced me otherwise. But I'm curious your perspective on like what organizations have the best opportunity, or what pros and cons exist, I guess, for big and small organizations who are working to step into this.
Yeah, I don't know about pros and cons. I mean, everyone very much needs to take this seriously. I would say I understand, and I've heard that before from smaller organizations thinking that only larger companies, because they have the resources, they can hire a chief diversity officer, they can, create multiple employee resource groups, yada, yada, right? They're the only ones who can invest in this. They're going to lead the way. And while that part of it might be true, if internally they are empowered and have that structure to focus on initiatives in the right way. Smaller organizations actually have a little bit of an advantage because you do have fewer people. It's easier to move forward and mobilize. And also, as you're growing, it's even more important to have the right tone for your culture versus, 50 years later, 100 years later, as Brilliance becomes and blossoms, into whatever you are growing into, right? It's easier to develop the right culture and that you're looking for and making sure that everyone's on the same page when you're smaller, so that as you grow, it simply evolves naturally and organically. Larger organizations, they have a little bit more work to coordinate with multiple teams and, different departments and whatnot. So again, they might have maybe a bigger pocketbook to dedicate to this should they want to, but, just as much work there too. And then you're dealing, well, okay. I warned you. I'm gonna try to be concise.
You're great.
I'd love to spend a few minutes, Morgan, talking about how you help organizations who are looking to build a more inclusive team.
Sure. So we provide workshops like we did for you. I would say right now, in terms of where most of our efforts and time is spent right now, recruiting. So talent placement is really hot. I don't think there's too much of a surprise there. So we work with clients in a couple of ways in that respect to create inclusive search strategies and help them find talent. And then the other area where we're most busy right now is, like I said, in the workshops and the training aspect. So we do a lot of tailored and custom workshops. We're actually taking on our first global client to do, let's call it empathetic communicators. So even when you're looking at global organizations and they have employees in like 10 different countries, right? So when you're looking at that, there can oftentimes be communication challenges simply because of cultural differences and norms. And you want to make sure that even though you're all there for the same mission, you're able to connect well. And one person's, response might come off differently, or maybe to another. So you need to make sure that you're having some intentional conversations up front to know that, hey, just realize, get out of yourself, be empathetic, not to have an ethnocentric perspective or judging again of someone, does one thing or whatever. So we do a lot of workshops and trainings. So again, a lot of tailored full-on workshops. And then we also started doing something called Brave Little Convos. So this is where after, whether you go through a training of ours or you're just looking for support with different topics and conversations that might come up every day and might be, that you can't necessarily plan for with a structured or a proactive or concentrated workshop, so topics about the holidays and how do you create inclusive, holiday traditions or embrace that and celebrate that at the very least within your organization. So decolonizing, right? So how do you create that? How do you, within the hiring process, how do you address pronouns in a way that isn't off-putting to potential candidates? So we troubleshoot a lot of those questions with Brave Little Combos, and we do like just these monthly hour-long sessions. So we do a lot of work in those two different areas. We also do personal or individual assessments. We do organizational assessments as well, and that's kind of, again, just based on the three pillars and the three-legged stool that I mentioned. So those are just some examples, but yeah, the trainings and the recruiting is pretty busy right now, which is good. And I'm also encouraged that the conversations that we're having are with leaders who are truly committed. Like you can hear the difference in tone, and it's unfortunate that tragedy sometimes prompts action. But before the tragic murder of George Floyd was the start of the pandemic. And at the start of the pandemic, you had a lot of companies saying that this is non-essential. And I don't even know when we'll have time to, focus on it. And even at that time or before that, conversations, I'll have a conversation with you, but I don't really know if this is right for us right now or a priority, right? So the tone has significantly changed. But what I appreciate is that it seems as though the commitment, at the very least, with most leaders is still there.
Why was it important for Brilliance to engage with Colorful Connections. And now that we've gone through a workshop with them, what would you say about our experience?
Yeah. Well, this is really important to me, and I've been so thankful, Morgan, to you and to Colorful Connections, to your team in the work that you've done for Brilliance. I was hesitant about engaging with Colorful Connections, not because I didn't believe in the work you were doing. I absolutely did. And I personally really wanted Brilliance to work on diversity, equity, inclusion. I also struggled with in a time like last year when we were questioning every investment. Is this something we should spend money on? Or I guess it was earlier this year. I don't know. All of the time runs together. Anyway, questioning, looking at money, and yet knowing at the end of the day that this was something really important for us to take a step into in some form. And I'm so thankful for the engagement that we had with Colorful Connections through the empathy building workshop that we did. Ultimately, realizing that I don't have training or background to have this conversation with my team. And also, it's really important to certainly start from the top in terms of leadership saying this is important, but also our team, we all have work to do in this process, and we're all in a different place. And having the support of Colorful Connections to come in and facilitate that conversation for us as a team really gave us a great foundation to have a language that we could have across us to talk about how we're different, how our team is pretty white, pretty homogenous on the whole, and how do we want to change? What does it look like to create a place that is more reflective of the community that we are in and the community that we serve? And to ask ourselves some hard questions and figure out what kind of work we need to do in the process. So, to me, that work, and also the fact that Colorful Connections has been there to support us along the way as we work to continue to do that work, to continue to have conversations with us as we are doing our own work. And now we're starting up an internal group, a DE&I council internally to help hold us accountable to that work, and having your support in that process has been really good. And I'm continually learning in the process and realizing that there's a lot more work in front of us. I'm just really thankful to have a partner in Colorful Connections to support us in that journey. On the whole, I would say, definitely highly recommend working with Colorful Connections. It's been a really positive move for us.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And I appreciate that feedback and hearing that. We hope that, we are able to, the work that we're doing, we're truly hoping to help make a difference. So thank you. Thank you.
On that note, I'm going to open it up to either of you to add anything as we close today's session out. Morgan, Lori, anything you'd like to add?
I can keep going and making research and whatnot. So I don't know. Be careful what you ask for, Jared.
Well, I would add this. I would say the unexpected benefit that I've seen through doing work on creating a more inclusive team is that as a result of having conversations around diversity, equity, and inclusion, Morgan, you brought up belonging earlier. And I think it's encouraged conversations that help people to get to know each other better and share in a way that we might not normally in, doing the development and other work that we do. And it's created an opportunity for us to grow stronger together and to be more intentional about the culture that we're creating as a team. So I think there were a lot of ways that it was beneficial that I just didn't anticipate. And I think in the end will help us to do better work for clients, coming back to one of your earlier points, Morgan, around being more innovative in our work.
That's great to hear. I'll also say, and not to ramble too much, Jared. So I'll also add from a different perspective in terms of from candidates who are looking to apply for different companies, this stands out a lot. So we do, and especially now given, post or not post, but given the implications of the pandemic and everyone having the opportunity and also being forced to look at their work situation differently, it's created a different level of expectation where before it was starting to creep up, but even more so now, candidates are very much mindful of who they are working for and wanting to work for a company on their terms that they feel as though resonate and align with their values. So we received feedback, and you participated in the empathy building workshop. So for that one, we started doing a spinoff of that for, new hires on an ongoing basis, so that anyone who goes to an organization, you start out, understanding this is important to this organization. Here's, as you said, some shared language so that you're coming in respecting the concept at the very least of diversity, inclusion, and equity, and understanding their role in it. And that even comes again is a big value for candidates where they look at that and they're appreciative, or at least more appreciative of companies, and knowing that, especially if you have a diversity commitment, because it's one thing to put something on your website and have a statement, and there's something, it's very different to then be able to work at a company and come on board knowing that this is so important, where from day one there's either training or that there are these opportunities or this active and ongoing conversation is happening. That stands out for candidates. So for anyone who's thinking about creating more inclusive hiring strategies, it is valuable, and all of this work is very valuable, even from the appeal aspect, because it is a job seeker market. It's very much, I have more influence, I have more power, and I would rather not work for you, no thank you. And we've come across this before, and we'll have conversations, of just making sure that the alignment is there. But I just wanted to share that this very much stands out too, where it's not just a one-sided conversation anymore.
Yeah, it's a great point. People want to work for an organization that reflects their values and that will be an inclusive place for them. So.
Like we said at the top, please follow Colorful Connections on LinkedIn. I highly recommend connecting with Morgan directly on LinkedIn as well. You can give Brilliance a follow if you'd like. And we punched in the Colorful Connections website in the chat, so you can access that as well. Thank you, Morgan, for taking time out of your day to join us. This has been wonderful. I always learn something new from you and your team, and looking forward to sharing this with the rest of the audience as we move forward.
Thank you both for the opportunity to talk and to continue this conversation, and for being such a wonderful partner. We truly do enjoy. We are just as mindful about who we work with and want to work with. So thank you for having the right intention behind this, and for continuing that work and making sure that it doesn't stop with just one workshop, one hire, and checking the box in that respect. So appreciate it.
Thanks, Morgan.
Thank you, everyone, for attending today, and we'll be following up with the recording shortly. Have a wonderful rest of your day, everybody.